All right, and then I'll go ahead and turn over to the project team now. Thanks. Wayne, if you wanted to go ahead and introduce yourself, or Alex.
Alex, thank you.
I'll go ahead and jump in. So I'm Alex Jovanovich, Community Services, Parks and Recreation. I'm the Community Services Deputy Director and part of the project team. And I'll make one note real quick, just as Sean had mentioned, this is being recorded, but we do highly encourage anyone that is participating that would like to provide input and feedback to please complete the survey sometime in between now and the 27th of November. With that, I'll turn it over to Wayne Colbank.
Great, thank you, Alex. My name is Wayne Colbank. I'm a landscape architect with Logan Simpson. One of the other persons you will hear on this presentation is John Southard. John is a chief historian with Logan Simpson. To give you a sense of the agenda for today's meetings, we've just had the introductions. We're now talking about the agenda. Right after this, we're going to start with the purpose of the meeting, the intent of the management plan, a very brief presentation on the project, including a history of the Papago and the Hayden Butte preserves, as well as some selected features and facilities in each one of those. Of course, the most important part here is getting your thoughts on the project, and we'll share how you can do that, and then we'll have question and answers. So the purpose of the meeting here is to hear from you. And, these items that you see here bullet pointed are those primary ones. We need to want to know what you think are the most important aspects of the preserves, what challenges we should be aware of as we are preparing our management plan for the preserves. What are the appropriate current and future uses? How the preserves can further enhance the community and be an additional enhancement? And what are your expectations for the preserves maintenance and management? So for those of you who may not be familiar with management plans, and this one in particular, we've identified what we intend to do here. First bullet point is to obtain goals, to update the goals and objectives for the preserves, to guide the current and future decision-making on what uses, operations, and activities going forward are what we want to see. Secondly, we want to incorporate strategies that conserve and maintain a healthy and native ecosystem, in addition to preserving the existing assets that are out there now in the field. We want to identify management areas, if we can, that would include different use areas and the resources needed for protection or restoration. To integrate environmentally sustainable recreation and educational opportunities and experiences throughout the preserves. To specify the best management practices and operating procedures and activities to be implemented over the near and long term. So this plan is for those things immediate and those things that happen over time. Lastly, we'll be looking for to be able to identify and evaluate potential funding sources and partnership opportunities. So when we speak of the preserves, there are actually two separate preserves, but this management plan is going to be a single management plan for both of them. So you see north of the river, Tempe Town Lake and Loop 202 is the Papago Preserves, and the Tempe, or most people know it as the Hayden Butte Preserve, is south. Other people know it as the A Mountain. So let's just look at them briefly. The Hayden Butte is a relatively small area, about 27 acres. It was designated by council action in 2002. It was previously studied to begin a management plan in 2017, but that plan was never actually completed. Some of the features that are out there now, most of us are aware of the water tanks and the paved access road / maintenance or pedestrian path to get you to the top. There is also the Leonard Monte Trail with trailheads and overlooks and rest areas, interpretive signage that primarily enters the preserve from the south. There are also a couple memorials out there that exist. And then, of course, because the terrain is so steep, there's a couple things that happen as it really kind of limits dispersed recreation across the entire preserve. But we do know that because of the steep terrain, the rock outcrops, there are some petroglyphs that exist out there as well. So just a sense of what exists out there. If we go to the Papago Preserve, which is about 8 to 9 times larger than the Hayden Butte Preserve. It was originally part of the Papago Saguaro National Monument between 1914 and 1930. And that National Monument designation included the Phoenix section of the Papago areas, which includes the zoo and those facilities there. It was designated as a preserve in 1918 by Tempe City Council. Now, just to kind of take a look at it, let me back up just for a second. You will notice that the part of the areas are separated, so they're discontinuous in locations. And one of the things that happens is Curry Road essentially bisects it, going east and west there in the southern 2/3 of that area. Well, if we start to look at what's out there, it's kind of characters. We have the Evelyn Hallman Park, which has the lake, which is the photo in the upper right. To the left of that is an area where folks have been jumping the moguls, the earthen moguls out there. Some people call it the BMX area. To the left of that, there are characteristic, very large granite rock outcrops. But in general, the area, as the photo in the bottom left shows, is a pretty broad open landscape broken up by some trails that have been hiking and biking trails that are out there. There is the one major concrete pedestrian path / maintenance road that is just immediately north of the SRP canal that is in that area. If you look on the south side of Curry, things are a lot more condensed. We have in the bottom left, you have the Lopiano Mesquite Bosque. Just immediately north of that, you have the canal trail, which is adjacent to the SRP canal that exists. Most of the other facilities are built facilities, such as the Loma del Rio, I'm sorry, excuse me. The Loma del Rio ruin, which is up on the top, which has a developed trail and a bridge that gets you up there. But basically from up there, you have some viewpoints looking north and also looking immediately south to Hayden Butte. Much more dense in terms of use and facilities in that sense. Now, there are some cultural resource activities and studies that we'll be doing here, and I'm going to just stop for a second and let John explain what those are and how they will fit into the management plan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Wayne. I appreciate it. Yes, the preserves, both of them, Hayden Butte Preserve and Papago Preserve, include land that are significant to the Alpine, widely known as the Pima, and the Pipash, widely known as the Maricopa communities, Native American communities, groups who have lived in the valley since time immemorial. So as part of our scope, Logan Simpson has been tasked with identifying and fully understanding the cultural resource considerations present here in advance of developing management recommendations for the preserve. So as part of this scope element, we're completing a number of subtasks to include a class 3 survey. So in archaeology, there is what is known as a class 1 inventory, basically a literature review looking at past work that has been completed, past surveys, write-ups, etc. And then there is an elevated level of study. It is a class 3 survey that is actually going out into the field and walking transects, essentially lines, looking for surface evidence of past habitation, looking for artifacts, etc. So that is a component of our cultural resources study here. We're also engaging with the tribes. Of course, Tempe has a land acknowledgement statement. The city has pledged to ensure that the considerations of the tribes, particularly the 4 southern tribes of Arizona, those who, again, have lived in the valley since time immemorial, ensuring that we meet with them, understand the concerns that they may have pertaining to this land, understand the significance of this land, and work with them to incorporate those considerations into the document and our planning recommendations. As part of this, we're also going to work with them to determine whether or not traditional cultural properties, as defined by the National Park Service, are present within either of the preserves. That's going to entail field visits, that's going to include interviews, ethnographic work, and other research components. So this is a very important part of our work, and one that we wanted to address early on to ensure that it receives the full and thoughtful consideration that it warrants. So with that, Wayne, I will turn it to you unless there's anything you'd like me to expand upon.
I think that's great, John. Appreciate that. Just want to move on to the projected schedule for the project. Trying to keep the schedule very simple because it has 2 primary activities. One is what we're calling data gathering, which also would include different surveys like the class 3 archaeological survey. We also have biological surveys, other things that all fall under that data gathering. And once we get our hands around all of that information, which will take us 6 to 7 months, we'll be able to then start focusing on the second aspect, which is the more important aspect, frankly, of this study, which is to establish the management goal, establish the best management practices that we want to undertake going forward, identify any actions, whether those are near-term or longer-term actions, and then look for funding and or partnership opportunities. And again, that will take the second half of the project. I didn't want to break it down into a lot of detail because I think it's a pretty straightforward approach here as to how we go forward. So now this is where you come in. Those folks who are participating in the meeting here and those who are going to provide information through the surveys. So there's some very specific things that we're looking for. And what you're seeing here, several questions. You'll see on the survey questions that are very similar to this, may have some other slight differences and maybe some ancillary other information that's being requested, but this is basically what you'll be looking for. We're trying to ascertain whether or not there are any uses or facilities that should be added, modified, or eliminated, and whether or not, if there are other ways the desert could be protected and preserved. What are some of the other ways that we could educate the public about these natural and cultural resources that are in preserves? And are there any improvements that we can make to the preserves maintenance activities or undertakings? And are there any other kinds of suggestions for how we're going to operate in the preserves? And those could be a range of things. These questions are somewhat open, and we're trying to get your input as to what these are that will best help us generate a management plan that's going to be successful for now and for the future. So these are the primary questions that you'll see on the survey. And for those of you on the line here, we have a QR code that you could use, take a photo of, or take that information so that you can get to the survey itself. The survey period will be open from November 15th to the 22nd. And even if you don't use the QR code, you can get to it at tempe.gov/forum. So there's your access. And I think most of you have got the invitation, probably will have gotten this information as well otherwise, but here it is on the screen as well. So that is the basic presentation of the information that we have. This study is really just beginning, which is the reason why we're looking for your input and your assistance to help us come up with a more thorough and complete management plan for the preserves. So I see there's one question in the chat. Let's see if we can get there.
Wayne, I believe that is Shauna sharing.
Oh,
the
okay.
link
I'm
to
sorry.
the survey.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, so feel free to raise your hand and you can come off mute to ask your question, or you can put it in the chat. Then we can make sure that we get your questions answered.
For anyone that happened to join the meeting a little bit late, I just wanted to remind everyone that while this meeting is being recorded, and we will obviously be able to capture any questions that you ask here today or make any comments that you make, we do highly encourage everyone to please go to that link and please fill out the survey.
Yes, I'll flip the screen back to how they can get to the survey.
Wayne, it looks as if there's a hand raised. Kelly Marie.
Okay, Shauna, do you want to catch that? I don't see it on my screen. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. As John said, Kelly raised her hand. So Kelly, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, what's up, team? I know you guys know me. It's Kelly. Quick question. Have you guys given any thought? I know it's early stages. I know you refer to it as the BMX, or I guess you would call it the jump lines. Is there a certain direction you're trying to move in? Because I know that I've gathered a ton of feedback from the cyclists in the area. I have at least over 20 cyclists that have all agreed that the city of Tempe needs to invest in a proper bike park, like what they have in Sedona and Flagstaff, for example. Right now, the way the jumps are, there's maybe 10 people. Everyone who's telling me it's like there's 10 people that can hit those jumps. You need to have something that's more of a beginner, intermediate, and an expert line in that area, or are you looking to remove it entirely? Just need feedback for the cycling community on that. Thank you.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for the question. And I think that's what this process and the plan is going to be utilized for, is determine long-term, not just that specific area, but the entire preserve. How do we manage it? What are elements of it that are maintained by the city, as well as what are just kept in place? One of the questions that we're asking on the survey is, are there things within the preserve that are recommended to maybe be modified or eliminated? I do think that, and maybe either John or Wayne can speak to this a little bit, I think that the surveys being done in the area will help to dictate what types of uses might be most appropriate through the preserves. So from a city standpoint, we at this point are not making any decisions as to what should be removed or eliminated or added. I'm really going to rely on community input and feedback, as well as any surveys that are being done.
And Alex, this is John. You're absolutely right. We're going to be looking at survey results, reviewing the preserve ordinance, taking in a great deal of feedback from stakeholders and consulting parties, to include the tribes. But at this point, again, we were very early on in the process. We've been out there for biological surveys. We've been out there for archaeological and cultural resource surveys, but there's no direction at this point on any topics such as the existing bicycling area or any other uses.
I would agree wholeheartedly with what's been said so far. This is Wayne, by the way. We've been out there, we've looked at it, but really no judgments, no evaluation of any use has taken place at this point. Those things will all be considered. I will say that as part of the management plan, we are looking to potentially identify management areas that could have different kinds of uses than other portions of the preserve. But to this point in time, because we're very early in the study, nothing has been done. No judgments have been made about any of those activities that are out there.
Thank you, Kelly, and thanks for sharing the survey. We appreciate that. Suri, you're next.
Hi, thank you. I had a question. There was at the beginning of the presentation a mention for one of the goals and future points would be looking for partnerships and funding. Could you elaborate a little bit on what, maybe some examples on what that would look like? Or I know nothing is set in stone, but maybe some examples that I could relate back on what that could mean.
Sorry, this is John Southwood with Logan Simpson. I'd be happy to speak to that. There are any number of items that require funding, be it trail maintenance, potential improvements, what have you. And there are a number of funding sources. For instance, the state of Arizona has a heritage fund that can be tapped for such projects. There are various grant sources, things of that nature. So to my understanding, that is the direction that is being examined or will be examined in relation to this study and the management recommendations and the costs to carry out management recommendations, in addition to, of course, traditional city funding.
Well, in addition to funding sources, obviously volunteer groups and groups that are interested in providing assistance and service to the city in managing the park or the preserves certainly is something we'll be looking at as well. But as John said, depending on the kinds of activities and uses that are going to be included in the management plan, those will generally identify the direction of where we might look for potential funding sources. For example, State Parks has a funding source that is used for trails. It's off highway trails, but there are other trails that I believe they have funding for as well. So there are a number of places we have not tried to corral or put the boundaries on where those opportunities might lie at this point in time.
Thank you. And were there other questions, or Gabe, I saw you had your hand up. If you wanted to add anything to that too, feel free. I'm not seeing any other hands raised or questions. Alex, did you want to go ahead and wrap it up, or have Wayne do that if we don't have any other questions?
Sure, Wayne, if you have any closing statements.
Well, obviously, we want to reach out to the general public and to Tempe citizens for sure to get whatever information that we would be helpful for us to know. And we want to get that input as soon as we can. But I would say that the process is going to be open for a while now. So even though the survey period may be about 2 weeks, we're not going to turn down any key information that might come along at some point in time during the process. So I would encourage people to continue to think about the preserves and how they would be managed, and provide that information to us whenever they have that.
Thank you. And as Wayne mentioned, we will keep you all updated and involved throughout the process as we progress through the project. So we really appreciate your attendance today, and Please do share the survey, as well as you're all welcome to join us. We're going to be in person tonight at 6 p.m. down at the Heritage Center off of College and Curry. So you're also welcome to come out and meet the team there as well. So we really appreciate your time and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.